Hi everyone, and welcome back to Blast in the Past, where we use Grandmaster games to hopefully inspire us for our own games and come up with some ideas that will crush our opponents and get some of those juicy rating points. So on the board in front of you is a very common position. This is known as a static chess position and can come from many openings. So although one game that I'm going to show you today comes from the Queen's Indian, or the Nimzo Indian, don't be dissuaded and think, oh, this won't come up in my games, as this actually will come up in many openings such as the Slav or the Caro-Kann. And for many of you, this position may already be familiar. And the idea behind this position is that the center is mostly closed, yet we still have some semi-open files on the C and E files respectively. And then each side is going to use those files as their main form of attack to move the position forward. Otherwise, we might as well just sit here and call it a draw. You want to actually be able to progress the game. Now, again, if you're a Caro-Kann player, this position seems very familiar, and an idea that you might be wanting to play is for the minority attack, which is it's a very good topic, and it's something that we're going to be doing next. But black doesn't always have to play game with white, and you might have a position where the minority attack might not come up, and that's the sort of position that we're going to be looking at in our game. And hopefully we're going to be able to take some stuff away from that using similar ideas and just understanding the static chess position of the closed center, semi-closed center, and using those open files to our advantage. So the game that I've got for us today is between two grandmasters. In white you have Topalov, the Bulgarian, I think, grandmaster, and in black you have Sasikaran, the Indian grandmaster, who was the second to Vishy Anand when he won his world championship. So by no means a slouch of a player either. I know Topalov's a bit more of a well-known player. And this game was played in 2007, so still somewhat recently. I say that 2007 is probably 15 years ago at this point, so it's still a bit old. And yeah, we're not going to focus too much on the opening because this position that we're going to talk about can come from quite a few openings, but I think it's just a good idea just to know where the position came from, so it's not just out of thin air. I haven't just made up on the spot. So we get into a Nimzo Indian. This is a very common opening, and I'm sure many people have played it or at least seen it being played. And at the moment we're just following all mainline theory. I'm not going to get into it too much. Black goes for a sort of Queen's Indian Nimzo setup, so uses both the ideas together. And we have castles, white kicks the bishop away, black brings the bishop back, and the most common move here, taking the pawn, and black takes back. And we can see now that the position on the board is very similar to what we had at the start in the sort of where the pieces were off, and that these four squares around the pawns are going to be very important to controlling the game and moving forward. Now, it's slightly different in the sense that black has chosen to fianchetto his bishop instead of having the pawn on c6, and this is sort of the main difference that we're going to be looking at today when the minority attack doesn't work. And we'll look at when it does work. Probably next video I'll get on to doing that. Sorry, just reset. And so the main ideas here is for white to control the position. Now, perhaps pause the video, and if it was black to move again, what do you think black would play? And that will help you come up with an idea of what white wants to play here to shut this idea down. So for example, if white made a nothing move like king h1 and it was black to play, black could actually be already better in this position, so white does have to play accurately. So the main break here for black, and to sort of solve his space issues, is to play c5. And as soon as black is able to play c5, they're by no means winning, but they're definitely equal at the very least. And if anything, you'd actually prefer to be black with these amazing bishops on these diagonals, as the centre's going to open up, and you realise that white's bishops aren't as strong. So therefore, we're going to have to stop c5, and the most easy and straightforward way is to play b4 and go with a sort of similar minority attack style of just pushing all our pawns on the queen side and taking space. Now, black decided to develop his knight, perfectly normal move, and at this point we're going to actually depart from theory, because the most played move here is queen b3. And before we play what was actually played in the game, if we just show queen b3 why it's a good move, the whole point again is to stop c5. And if c5 is stopped here simply because you can't take back because you'd be losing the bishop. So it works for tactical reasons, although sort of somewhat simple tactic. It's nice to know, and that, again, we're just stopping c5, so it's very thematic. This is what we're going for. Now, Topalov decided to stop c5 in a different way, and stopped it by force by simply playing b5. Now c5 can't be played because passant, and this is just a very nice position for white, and there's a weakness in the centre. Black has an isolated pawn. There's a lot to go after. The queen will come to b3 anyway and attack the pawn. So c5 can't be played. And we're just going for the same sort of themes and ideas. There's nothing too crazy at this point being played. Black obviously isn't going to sit around doing nothing. Black is also a grandmaster. So similarly how we talked earlier about how white will play on the queen side, black will now use their semi-open file and play on the king side and go for some counterplay. And they put their knight on a knight square here. We don't really want to take it yet, as it will only open up the centre, which will help black with their bishop problem. So instead we develop our own bishop. Black again plays for that open file. We should play a4 just to support our b4 pawn. Black develops their rook, hoping to get more pieces down this e file. We move our knight away, just so that the knight can't trade for our knight, and also our knight might be quite nice on g3. And black decides to close down the position. And at this point, I think it's a really good point to stop and sort of take note of the position, because if you're seeing this for the first time, it might be a bit awkward and thinking of what to do. And you may very well get this in your game, because we have been following theory and most sort of theoretical ideas up until this point. So it's very easy to get this position. And by knowing common ideas in theoretical positions, hopefully you'll be able to outmaneuver your opponent. Because there's a very nice idea here which white decided to play, and we need to sort of go over why white decided to play it first. So what's the issue with black's position? White is better, but why? White is better because we can see that the light square bishop is hitting against granite and isn't really doing much. Also, the c7 pawn is a bit weak and it's a bit backwards. And if, for example, white was able to get rid of the c7 pawn by playing c6, then the b6 pawn would become a weakness. So for example, these aren't moves, but I'm just trying to make an example. If this was to happen, then this pawn would then become the weakness and our focus, so it's not particularly easy to get rid of black's weakness either. So with that in mind, we now have to think also about what white wants to do. Well, white actually has quite a nice bishop here, and the rest of the minor pieces are actually decently placed. This knight can come this way, it's not actually that behind. White's worst piece by far is going to be their bishop on b2. And the reason why this bishop is bad is because it's stuck behind its own pawn chain. Therefore, if we're able to swap this bishop for this bishop, which is black's probably best piece, white would be feeling very good for themselves. So with that in mind, white would play, and did play, bishop a3, which I think is a very good move, just swapping off the bishops and getting rid of white's weakness. Black decided to develop his rook. It's not much else to do, you can't really avoid the trade. And white took. Now you have a choice how to take back with black, and it does seem a bit obvious at first to take with a rook, because then you just wouldn't be doubling your pawn. The downside of this though is still that the c7 pawn is a massive weakness, and we're able to move our knight in, get more pressure, and also d4, d5 is going to be a bit weak as well. So black decided to have a double pawn instead. And yes, we've gotten rid of our c7 weakness, but now we have double pawns in the centre, so this is getting a bit awkward for black already. White decides to challenge the file. This seems all natural. Black develops his pieces. We give our king some love, just making sure that we've got no back rank issues before we move off the back rank with our queen. Black moves their rook into a more sensible space. We develop our queen, attacking the centre. Black also gives themselves some lift. White decides to start taking, and also pressing the file. Black challenges again, we again take, and finally again we challenge the file. And at this point, black could decide to trade off queens, but if they trade off queens, black will always be worse because of these pawns in the centre being quite weak. So black doesn't want to do that, and to keep more fighting chances, decided to keep the queen off the board. So black gave up the file. And I think at this point, hopefully I've explained the moves well enough that nothing too crazy has come up so far. Now the next move is also a nice deep idea that perhaps if you want to pause the video before I give a brief explanation as to why the next move might be played, come up and think of a plan for white. White is again better here, but how are you going to show that? So the really good plan here, again, is just to look at the minor pieces and to think, well, which is the best minor piece for black, which is the worst minor piece for white. And we can see clearly that the best minor piece for black is this knight here on e4, is attacking a lot of the key squares, taking up space, and we want to get rid of this knight. Now, if we trade the knight for one of our minor pieces, it's not particularly great, because although that knight is a very nice piece, again, we're just going towards an endgame and it's more likely to be more drawn. Whereas if we were able to kick it away with a pawn, we can then secure the e4 square and move forward. So the idea we want to be playing is f3 to kick this pawn, to kick this knight. Now, if we just go for f3 straight away by moving our knight away, we'll then have the problem to see why queen e7 is a nice move, because it will then attack our e3 pawn. Bear with me, I know this is a bit of a long one. So therefore, keeping that in mind, we want to defend our e3 square, so we can then move our knight and then attack black's knight. So by doing this, we can then come to the idea that we want to defend d3. And what's the best way to defend d3? The best way to defend d3 is to play queen c1. Keeping guard of the open file, defending e3, and enabling our plan to dislodge the knight in the centre. Again, if you were to see this move for the first time without some sort of explanation, this move seems a bit crazy. But having explained it, it's not really clear what black's going to do. It's not like white is under severe threat and black can't just start launching an attack out of nowhere, because black doesn't really have much plans, and it's really white that's playing for the advantage. So black decided to play g6. Again, there's not really much black can do to punish white for being slightly odd with queen c1. We go through with our plan, moving our knight out of the way. Black moves his king forward. We first take some space away from black, because we don't want black to be able to play g4 and perhaps have an attack. So we're just slowing that down first. Black moves their knight away because they want to, when retreating their knight, the other threat of playing h4 was taking away the retreat square, so black needs to now have a retreat square for his knight. And we attack the knight, and the knight moves back. And we can see that yes, we have moved backwards with our pieces slightly, but these pieces can very easily get back into the game, whereas black is going to have a bit more trouble with the slightly cramped space they have. We reroute our knight, improving it still, because we saw that h5 was coming and therefore we couldn't come to the square anyway. We start rerouting our pieces. And we're bringing all our pieces towards the king side. We've sort of given up on the queen side. We've done our duty. We've created these weaknesses in the centre. We've made this bishop pretty bad. And now we're focusing on the king side. And we can suddenly see, well, it's not too sudden, that white's pieces are much better and black really is stuck without choices. Black decided to play king h6. Now at this point, something quite exciting and crazy happened. But before we get into that, perhaps pause the video and come up with an idea here for white to help improve the position. So the best way to improve this position is to actually start bringing the king to the centre, and the idea is that eventually we'll bring our knight round to c3. Again, this seems like a long manoeuvre, but black doesn't have really much to do. We'll put pressure on the centre, and white will slowly improve and start and build pressure and make it become more and more annoying for black to play. Now this didn't happen in the game, in part because Topalov took a sort of very sensible decision and realised that black was actually low on time and decided to go in for the kill and go for a tactical solution. Unfortunately, the tactics aren't super sound. It's by no means losing for white, but white decided to go for this because black again was under time pressure, and finding all the correct solutions in this position is very hard to see. And white decided to take on h5. And already black only has a one move response. The only move that black can play is to take with the pawn. If you decide to take with the king, then this is pretty much game over after queen f4, and you're threatening checkmate. It's along here, this bishop is coming through, this, more importantly, this pawn is coming, and there's not really much black can do about anything, and it's game over. There's a force mate in 11 with best play, which sounds absurd, but if you don't find g5 here, then it's also force mate in 4, so you really do have to be careful with black. So you can't take with the king. Taking with a pawn also seems more reasonable anyway, so this seems more natural. And then the nice follow-up that he had in mind was playing the queen back to the end, threatening checkmate again. Again, there is only one move, so perhaps if you want to improve your technical ability, your tactics, pause whilst I'm going through these just to see if you can come up with the ideas here. The only move stopping checkmate in this position, or significant material loss, is to play f5, disconnecting the bishop from the important h7 square, bringing the knight into the game. At this point, white has mobilised all their pieces to the best squares, and if you want to continue the attack, you just want to bring in more pieces, so we're attacking the pawn with check, and also going after this pawn too. Black has, again, the only move that saves this position, defending the pawns. White decides to take. You can't take back this would be a mistake because this would just be a mate in 1, so you can't take the bishop. And you also don't want to take down here with check. This might seem like a nice in-between move, but you finally find that black really has no moves in this position, and they're about to get checkmated. The king is just surrounded, whereas white's king is quite safe. So this happened. Black again found the only move, holding on to the game. White took, black took back, and white played this really nice move, knight takes h5. Notice how the knight can't be taken because this would be a mate in 1, as the pawn covers the only other escape square for the king, and the queen defends the pawn, and these squares are all taken up. So another pawn taken. And at this point, we just need to start counting material. And we'll find that it's actually even, because we have a bishop for 3 pawns. But notice how this bishop is the advantage for black, but this bishop is going to take forever to get back into the game. And black, to their credit, continues in the only way that holds on the game and takes with check. The king moves out of the way, and if you want to perhaps pause the video for the last time and find the only drawing move here for black. So the only drawing move here for black, and unfortunately black didn't see it, is to take on d4 and to continue the game. And we'll find out why this leads to a draw when we play what actually happened in the game. So what actually happened in the game is that black decided to bring their queen back to help with the defense. But this sadly doesn't work after this check, and we start bringing our pawns forward. And through this move order, white is very fast to move their pawns, and after a few checks and moving about, probably due to time issues, white decides to take and bring their king up, and we can see that these 3 pawns are going to be much faster than black is able to get the bishop back into the game, and the game is going to be over very quickly. After moving the knight, white will obviously just take and start pushing the pawns, and there's no actual way that black can defend this, and I'll fast forward through the endgame, although there is some tactical skill here. You need to play king g5 here to make sure that you have the advantage, and keep pushing, giving up 1 pawn, and then even ignoring the bishop sacrifice and just going, I'm going to queen my other pawns because there's nothing black can do, and eventually they got to this position and black resigned the game because this pawn is promoting. And this was just a really nice game by white. And if we go back a bit, and this will help us understand why queen taking on d4 was so important. If the queen was able to take on d4 earlier, then these pawns wouldn't be stuck, and then this bishop would not only be able to get into the game faster, but white wouldn't be able to push their pawns without risking black promoting themselves. So this game wasn't perfectly played, and there were some sort of missed opportunities in the end game. Not that white was worse at any point in this game, and it just shows the power of understanding the position. And white, as I said, could have chosen to go for that maneuver and putting the knight on c3 and attacking the weak centre, and the game definitely would have continued and white definitely would have had an advantage. But it just shows how tactics can be mixed with positional ideas, and you can have a really good game. So next time, hopefully, if you get static position, you'll know to push your space on the queen side, control black, hope they don't play, make sure they don't play c5, and then develop the position. Notice the weak pieces in the same way that black's best piece was that knight and how to dislodge it, playing around the bad bishops, and just holding the position so black doesn't really have any play, and you're the one having all the fun. Yeah, I hope that you can use that idea in your game and hopefully win some of them. But thanks for watching.